Hey everyone, it's Dr. H, your friendly wargame guy at the Air Command and Staff College, and this is the basics of Strike. Each individual piece of Strike is going to matter, and we're going to talk about each one in turn. This is just an overview to help you understand the pieces and what it is we're talking about. Strike is a big part of the system, all kinds of things do all kinds of damage. But all of the damage from airstrikes, ballistic missile strikes, cruise missile strikes, special operations forces raids, naval combat, all kinds of things are ultimately subsumed into the strike system, right? What strike fundamentally means is that damage has been done by some sort of element that produces strike. We'll talk about what that means in a second, but first I want to talk about a few pieces. So when it comes to strike, right, there are cruise and ballistic missiles. Those are individual individual points. You expend them, you conduct strikes. SOF conduct raids. We talked about raids. We'll talk about that. We'll talk about it in the SOF video. There are certain things that conduct naval strike, right? Chinese ballistic missiles, for example. We'll talk about that in its own due term. We will talk about naval combat produces strike as well. So if naval units shoot each other, that produces strike. Naval contested movement produces strike. Again, these are things we're going to talk about in its own turn. A lot of things produce strike. I've probably forgotten a few just sitting here trying to remember. But keep that in mind, right? Strike is just a generic way of talking about damage. So I want to talk a little bit about strike. A lot of pieces that are commonly used in strike. I want to talk a little bit about the strike table, and I want to talk about strike results, or at least where to find them, right? We're not going to go into a lot of detail on each one. You can read tables, you can read paper. I'm not going to insult your intelligence that way. So for example, right, we have big monitor. There we go. So we have a strike marker, right? Strike 1, strike 2. These markers mark strike for us, right? So if I get a strike 1 result on a thing, I'm going to put a strike 1 marker on there. If I get a strike 2 result, I'm going to put another thing on there. There's a marker that says destroyed. So for things that I can't physically pick up, like that airbase symbol down there, right? I'm just going to mark what's destroyed. We also have special collateral damage that reminds us that we may need to check collateral damage. Collateral damage in the game does not have the same meaning as it does in the military. It's a question of whether or not I blew up any air pieces when I blew up an air base. We'll talk about that in its own time. Airplanes conduct strike. The strike value is this last one down here. So in this case, this, what is that? So equate 34? We'll call it 34. Has a strike value of 4 star. We'll talk about what that star means later when the time comes. But it has a strike value of 4. We also have a Patriot battery here, right? Patriot batteries provide air defense. It has the name of the thing. It has a silhouette of a Patriot, and then it has first the detection value of 9, a SAM value of 8. Those are really high numbers. It only goes to 10. We'll talk about what those mean when we talk about SAMs and intercepts. And then this number 5 in a hex, it has a range of 5 hexes. So all hexes within 5 hexes of this battery are defended. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? This town here is under the protection of that SAM battery. Pretty neat. There's also, a lot of countries have SAMs. Only one country has THAAD. That's the United States. And then, as you can see, right, there is a detection and a SAM value against ballistic missiles, right? So THAAD is only useful against ballistic missiles. But that detection of 9, SAM 9, is really quite useful to have available. Okay, so we have the strike chart, right? And again, almost all strikes are going to end up being conducted by understanding this chart. Now again, you won't be rolling on the chart, right? This is part of the adjudication, but to understand what we're looking for. So we want to know the terrain, right? What we're doing the strike with, and then we're going to index that with what the value of the strike is. So for example, right, if it is a strike value of 2, or if it's a other HQ artillery, right? So it could be a physical description, it could be a different description. We'll talk about all of those pieces as we get closer to, as we get in and we discuss some specifics. about those. We've already talked about land units and how to read them in a different video. If you need that, go see that. We'll talk about how to conduct strikes with what units are eligible to conduct different kinds of strikes later in their own video. Don't worry about that. So this is gonna we'll start here, right? Urban terrain. We'll read across strike value 5, and then we're gonna roll on this column. Right, we had this long list of DRMs. I'm not going to read off each one to you. Presumably, you can take a flip through them. But take a notice of what, remember, minus helps you, plus doesn't. So see what sort of things affect strike. Be aware of what sort of things affect strike. And then we would roll a die, add our die roll modifiers, and then read down the column and find the result, right? It might be an X, destroyed, a strike 2, or a strike 1. Keep in mind, strike is cumulative, so if I have strike 1 plus strike 1 equals strike 2. Strike 1 plus strike 2 equals destroyed. Strike 2 plus strike 1 equals destroyed. If you're destroyed, you're kind of always destroyed, right? That doesn't change very much. So, right, once I have my result, but what does that actually mean? I'm glad you asked. So, let me see if I can be smart. Remember which one of these has the thing. Nope. There we go. Okay. There is a strike effects chart. The thing that was struck, and then the strike value. And you can read off on the strike effects chart what each thing does, right? So, for example, right, we may have struck an amphib and it has a strike 2, so it has this result, right? We just read across. So those are the effects of the strike. What it means for each thing that we do, right? Strike 1, strike 2, strike 3. As we destroyed, as we accumulate yet more strike. This is a very basic view. Just remember that the terrain you're striking matters. The thing you're striking may matter. Know how to read the value of the piece that you're striking, right? Some things will say naval 3. It may be a naval piece using the strike table. Right, that'll come up. We'll talk about where each one comes from in due time. Might be an air piece, it might be a missile, so on and so forth. So know what you're doing. Understand the DRMs, right? Read through that list of DRMs and see which ones are going to apply to you. There are going to be a lot of weird things that never apply to you. That's perfectly fine. And then what does it all mean? We have a strike results table. So that's a very basic look at strike, right? Where things come from and what things mean. We're going to get into a lot more detail as we go along and as we talk about things. We'll get into a fair bit of detail about all that. So, for now, that's my story and I'm sticking to it. This has been Strike Basics, and I hope this has armed you with knowledge.